We were planning a 32-day trip to Kazakhstan, but before booking flights, I double-checked the stay limit and realized it was only 30 days. 2 extra days would have meant changing flights, paying fees, and explaining the mistake at immigration. That's exactly the kind of mistake this checklist is built to catch. Travel problems don't usually come from dramatic situations. Most of the time, they come from small details people didn't know they were supposed to check. Stay limits, entry authorizations, document requirements. After enough near misses across 129 countries, I've stopped relying on memory and started running this checklist before every trip. Australia was the moment that pushed me to formalize it. I arrived at the airport and realized I hadn't completed the electronic travel authorization. It was approved quickly, so I didn't miss my flight, but it was close enough that it became a permanent step in my process. That's how most of this checklist developed. A near miss that became a rule. The checklist I use now covers 5 areas: legal entry rules, financial setup, gray area restrictions, document preparation, and how I handle immigration conversations. I always check entry requirements before booking flights. The first thing I look up is how entry works for my passport. Some countries require a visa in advance, some offer an e-visa, while others allow visa on arrival. I also double-check the details for my partner's passport. Then I check the passport validity. Many countries require 6 months of validity beyond your departure date and 2 empty pages. Next is the stay limit. Kazakhstan is a clean example of how this saved us. We were planning to be there for 32 days, but the limit was 30. Because I caught it during planning, I simply shortened the trip. Our trip to Jordan this year was somewhat different because the information itself was unclear. Different sources gave different answers about how long visitors could stay and whether or not registration at a local police department was required. And in this case, even official sources were contradicting each other. Situations like that remind me to check multiple sources and be flexible. I also have to decide which passport I'll use. I have both US and Italian passports. Most of the time I travel on my US passport, but occasionally the Italian passport gives me easier entry or longer stays. Australia is the reminder that even simple steps matter every time. I arrived at the airport without completing the ETA in advance. It worked out, but it was close enough that I added entry authorization check to my permanent list for every country. Once the legal side is clear, the next thing I check is money, because money problems can turn a normal arrival into a stressful one. I learned this one early. On my first trip to Southeast Asia in 2014, I landed in Siem Reap, Cambodia. I needed $20 cash to pay the visa fee at the border. I had no cash on me. There was an ATM in the arrival hall, but it didn't do me any good. My bank account had a clearing delay that I hadn't known about when I set it up. The money was there on paper, but it wasn't accessible yet. A stranger lent me the $20. I paid him back a few days later. That trip taught me not to assume anything about access to money. Now I travel with more than one debit card and more than one credit card, and I don't keep them all in the same place. I also carry cash. Usually around $200 US, but it depends on the country. Before arriving somewhere new, I check whether airport ATMs exist and whether they work reliably. An ATM being present doesn't mean that it will work or that it will work for your card. This section feels unnecessary until the day it isn't. This is the category many people skip. If I'm traveling with a drone, I check the drone laws. If I might rent a car, I check whether an international driving permit is required. I also look at cultural rules that might affect everyday situations. Here's a small example of what this looks like in practice. When Kevin and I crossed from Senegal into the Gambia, we knew that customs could be strict about certain medications. So we left our first aid kit in Senegal instead of bringing it across the border. A few days later, we went back and picked it up. A few minutes of research avoided a long conversation at customs. Before arriving somewhere new, I make sure the key documents are accessible on my phone. Proof of onward travel is the one that comes up most often. Not every time, but often enough that I stopped treating it as optional. If we have something booked, I have the confirmation accessible. If we don't, we've already thought through what our answer is, and we're prepared to book something on the spot if it comes to that. I relearned this one recently. We had onward travel booked from the UAE to Turkmenistan, and when we went to check in for the flight to the UAE, the agent asked to see it. I hadn't screenshotted it, and the confirmation email wasn't easy to find. I ended up pulling out my laptop at the check-in counter and spending 5 minutes searching for it. I found it, but that was 5 minutes of stress that a single screenshot would have prevented. I also have my proof of accommodation ready and my travel insurance confirmation saved somewhere I can find it quickly. Everything important is backed up to the cloud, and I carry a copy of my passport in my bag. This isn't about being hyper-organized. It's about not getting slowed down at the desk because one document is missing, or not having thought through a question you could have anticipated. When I reach the immigration desk, my rule is simple. I answer the question that was asked, and then I stop. If they ask why I'm visiting, I say tourism. If they ask what I do for work, I say I'm an editor. It's true, and it's the simplest explanation. If they ask how long I'm staying, I give the exact number of days. If they ask where I'm staying, I show the booking. If they ask for proof I'm leaving, I show the onward ticket. I don't volunteer extra information. Short but complete answers usually make the interaction smoother. I've also had secondary screening entering the US, including the SSSS designation. It's inconvenient, but not traumatic. The process is simple. Stay calm, have documents ready, answer directly, and be respectful. In Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, we had accommodation booked, but the immigration officer didn't accept it because it didn't include the building name. Eventually, we gave her our taxi driver's phone number. She then allowed us to enter. A checklist reduces avoidable mistakes, but it doesn't solve everything. Rules sometimes change without notice. Online sources can disagree. And occasionally, an immigration officer interprets something differently than expected. Preparation simply means that when something unusual happens, you're dealing with one unexpected issue rather than several preventable ones. A checklist won't prevent every travel problem, but it removes most of the avoidable ones. I've turned this entire process into a one-page pre-country checklist that you can download from the first 2 lines of the description. And if you want more videos where I break down things like this, with real examples, real numbers, and the mistakes I've made along the way, hit subscribe. That's what I share here.